Yes. Okay, good. Okay.
Started.
Okay, fine. That's fine. Okay. All right.
The second round of Shabbos soup you bought?
Okay. No more Shabbos soup. Actually, there was Yom Ha'atzmaut in the middle. You didn't have a good shaila from your mangal?
Is that your definition is if you blow? Because for sure when you go back for seconds of Shabbos soup, you do not blow.
I don't want to talk about that. Okay. Sfeka. Okay, let's take a look. The Gemara in Masechet Zvachim. Okay. Now, just let's say at the outset, it will emerge from the sugyot, both today and next week, that there are different types of sfeka. There's sfeka and ta'arovot, which is what we're going to start with today. You have something which is asa that falls into a ta'arovet, and then it falls into another ta'arovet, and another ta'arovet. Okay, that's what the Gemara here is going to talk about. And then then we have sfeka beguf. Right, the best example of that is Gemara in Masechet Ketubot and Daf Tet, where there's a sfek whether a woman is muteret to her husband. The husband says that the woman wasn't a betula, so we have a sfek. The Gemara says it should be a sfeka, sfek tachtav, sfek eno tachtav. Whereas if she had relations while she was arusa or maybe beforehand, if it was while she was an arusa, then she's asura lebala. If it was beforehand, then she's not. And even if it was tachtav, even if it was after the erusin, safek ba'ones, safek b'ratza. So if it was ba'ones, she's still muteret, and if it was b'ratzon, she's asura, right? So that's sfeka. Safek tachtav, safek eno tachtav, safek ba'ones, safek b'ratzon. Okay? So that's an example of a sfeka beguf. It's a question of events as opposed to ta'arovot. Okay? So what we're starting here is a sfeka of ta'arovot. We have something which wasn't batel, fell into a ta'arovet, and then fell to another ta'arovet. Okay, so that's sfek of ta'arovet. Okay, so let's start with that.
In that case, you don't live rare because you don't trust her?
What?
Why don't you just ask her?
There's a question of whether we believe her, but it has to do with Shavya Nafshi Chaticha Disur. He does not believe her. Right? That gets us very much involved in the sugya in Tubot prematurely. Okay? So let's just see here. So the Gemara says, let's see. Meitive. Okay, let's start from here. Safek avodat kochavim asura. Sfeka muteret. If you have something which was used in avodat kochavim, so it becomes asur bahana. Okay? There's an isur lo yidbak biyadcha ma'uma min acherem. Avodah zarah is asur bahana min haTorah. Okay. So it says,
where are we holding here?
We're in the fifth line. Okay. Safek avodat kochavim asura. Sfeka muteret. Okay. Ketzad. Okay. Kos shel avodat kochavim. The Holy Grail. Okay. Kos shel avodat kochavim shenafal leotzar malei kosot. Kulan asurot. Okay? Because midrabanan, avodah zarah is not batel. It's not batel barov. You have a room full of kosot. One of them is a kos avodah zarah. It's not batel. It should be, and midoraita it's batel barov. But midrabanan, because it's avodah zarah, it's not batel barov. Okay? So kulan asurot, because it's not batel. Piresh echad mehem liribo. So from this otzar malay kosot, one of them fell out and entered into 10,000 other kosot. Umiribo liribo. Okay, and from this second ta'arovet went into another ta'arovet. Mutari. The last ribo are mutari. Okay. So the Gemara says this point is a machloket Tanaim. Titania, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, rimonei badan. So we talk a certain type of rimonim, and it's a case of their orla. Okay, so they're asurim b'chol shehu. They're not batel because they're davar chashuv. So we're not talking about Isra Avodah Zarah anymore. We're talking about something else which is not batel. because of davar chashuv. Okay? Rimonei badan asurim b'chol shehu. Ketzad. Nafal echad mehem l'toch ribo. Umiribo l'ribo asurim. So the second tarovet is asur. Rabbi Shimon Yudomer, Mishum Rabbi Shimon l'ribo asurim. In the first tarovet they're asur because it's not batel. Umiribo l'shlosha. Umishlosha l'makom acher mutar. The third tarovet is mutar. What's with the second tarovet? Let's just hold on. Okay? So, what the Gemara seems to be saying here is that when a sfeka is mutar, it's only mutar, for some reason, it only mentions as part of the third ta'arovet. Whereas intuitively we would have said, let's say we have something which is not batel. Okay, you have a kos shel avodah zarah. Okay? It falls into a other kosot. So that's ta'arovet number one. Sa'al ze ne'emar, avodah zarah is not batel barov. If I say that sfeka is mutar, so then I would say that if something fell from that first ta'arovet into another tarovet number two, so that is a sfeka. What's the sfeka? Now I have tarovet number two. I take one kos from this tarovet and I say, sfek if this is the kos that fell in from the first tarovet. And sfek, this was here before. And even if you say this is the kos that fell in from the first tarovet, sfek that this is the original kos that fell into the first tarovet. Right? Everybody follow me? Would it be better with a diagram?
Yes.
Yes, I sense it would be better with a diagram. Okay. All right, let's do it this way.
Well, we say that...
Hold on. Okay, we'll do it like this. You'll excuse my... Okay? Here's a kos. Okay, now... Okay. Excuse me, you already know my artwork here. Here's the kos of avodah zarah, okay? Here's the kos of avodah zarah, okay? It fell in to here. And it's lost. I don't know which one in here. This is tarovet number one. Okay? It fell into here. So all this is aser because this is not batel. If this was batel, it would be batel barov. And then whatever we said about bittul barov, they're asur all one after the other, they're asur all together at the same time, whatever, right? But whatever we said about bittul barov, it would occur here. But Chachamim said that it's not batel barov. So if it's not batel barov, then there's an iser kavua here, right? And therefore everything in here is asur. Okay? Tarovet number one, everything is asur, midrabanan. Okay. From here, some other kos fell into tarovet number two. Okay? So now we have in tarovet number two, l'cha'ora, I should have said. Now I take one of these. I say it should be a sfeka. Say I take this one. Okay? I take the one H for the Holy Grail. I take this one, right? And I say this l'cha'ora, I should say this is a sfeka. What's my sfeka? Sfek if this one is the one that fell from here. Right? Because there were those that were here before, right? Okay. So I don't know if this was one of those that was here before. Right? This was one of those that was here before. Or this is the one that fell from number two, that fell from number one. Okay? Now let's say worst case scenario, this is what fell from number one. So just because it fell from number one, it doesn't mean it's the original Isser. Sfek if that which fell from number one is the original kos shel avodah zarah. Right? That l'chora is sfek. Right? Okay. But for some reason, just hold on a second, the Gemara never says that this is mutter. The Gemara only says that tarovet number 3 is mutter. Right? I have a bunch of kosot here in number 3, okay? And something fell from here to here. So here I say these are mutter because of a sfeka. But here the Gemara, in this case, in Tarovet number 2, the best we can say is the Gemara is conspicuously silent. Okay? All right, let's see. Right?
The Gemara has done two things. The Gemara, and you're not relating to it explicitly. We had a din of kavua, so I understand the midrabanan. You say that first mixture is all issue because it's kavua. But we had a second principle that you haven't addressed.
Namely?
That called the parish meruba parish. Even if it's not a rove, even if it didn't have a din of bittul, the point is that the object that comes out that falls into the second mixture, okay, you can't. Are you saying that midrabanan not only do we?
Avodah Zarah, you don't have to the rove.
No, I understand that, but it's saying more than that. It's saying that it's like what we had with Lach, where you turn everything into one entity of Isser, and it's the Vada Isser.
So let's talk about that. That is important for understanding why we may need 3 Tarovot. Hold on, okay? You're anticipating something. Let's take a look at Tosfot, okay? So Tosfot is bothered by why the Gemara talks about 3 Tarovot. Okay? Pirish echad mem l'ribo mutarim. So he says, lo itzrich miribo l'ribo, right? The third one, right? The Gemara only mentions the third one. Ela l'meimar manda asar bekulu ki depirish la'el. Really, the one who's matir in a sfeka is matir even in the second Tarovet, the way I explained it. So why does it say mutter in the third? Because there's somebody that asers even in the third. Right? There's a daya here that we don't paskin like that says that avodah zarah is aser ad sof kol adorot. So you should just know that the one who says it's aser even in the third. Because the matir is matir in the third, and the oser is oser even in the third. But the matir himself, he's even matir in the second. Okay? That has to do with the context of the Gemara. Okay? We don't have to get into that. Okay? That the reason the Gemara mentions the third one is only to tell you the koach of the oser. That the oser asers even in the third. But the matir is matir even in the second. Okay? Good. Inami mishum diyesh chiluk ben ribo rishon l'ribo sheni. The ribo rishon, now the ribo rishon is the second tarovet. Okay? I mitani bekul bevat achat asur. The kamitani bechad sfeka. The first ribo, it would be this one, number 2. It's a little confusing. The first ribo is mi ribo l'ribo. Right? So this is the first ribo. This ribo, if you have hana from all of them at the same time, that's asur. This one is only mutter echad, because if you say that this is a sfeka, it's only sfeka because you're taking one of them. But if you take all of them at the same time, then you basically know that you're getting the one that fell in from the first group, right? So you're getting hana from suffix number 1 for sure, right? You don't have, so that's asur. So that's why it says miribo l'ribo. The second time here, these are mutter even all at once. So there's a difference. It's true number 2 is mutter, mitam sfeka, but it's still not mutter all at once. To be mutter all at once, you have to go to the third ta'arovet. Then even if you're metani mikulu kechada, you're still metani only from a sfeka.
So like if you're making pomegranate juice.
Yeah, well, juice is going to get as complicated here, because then you you definitely from everything. So that's bad. Right, then you have one suffix even. Right? Then you're going to go, you even get, yeah. You have one tarovet. You don't even have a suffix in that case.
So what would be an example?
No, you have specific units. Right? If you have one rimon fell into the, solid rimon fell into a pot. So that's, now everything in this pot is a suffix. Now, one from that pot fell into the second pot. Every individual in that pot is a sfeka. But if you made a juice out of that second pot, right, if that's the case, that would be mitani misafek echad, because you're definitely getting hana from the one that was in the first pot, and that's us. Okay? So the reason the Gemara has to go to the extent of three pots, of three tarovot, is because there's a distinction between the second tarovet and the third tarovet. The second tarovet is only mutter not bevat achat, and the third tarovet is heter gamur. But even bevat achat, it's mutter, because the most it could be is that you're nene from the sfeka, and we said sfeka is mutter. Okay? Let's see. Okay, let's continue here. Kev b'vat achat mitani, aval ribo sheni afilu nene mikulam b'vat achat sfekahu v'shari v'chein miribo legimel legimel mutar aval asur lenot migimel rishonot b'vat achat v'chein hashnayim shari mehaitama. Okay. All right. So we have a machloket. What the status of the second tarovet is? If the second tarovet, according to the first day in Tosot, the second tarovet is mutar legamrei, and according to the second day in Tosafot, the second tarovet is asur b'zeh chazeh, and only the third tarovet is mutar legamrei. Okay. The Rambam, I have the Rambam here.
And Rashi, like the first.
What? Rashi's the first way, yeah. The Rambam, then the Rambam is a stira. Okay? The first Rambam, Chod Macholot Asurot, says as follows. Nafal, this is a Chod Macholot Asurot, Perek Tetzayin Halacha Yud. Nafal Rimon Echad, Mina Ta'arovet Hazot. Okay, so we already have a Ta'arovet of the Rimonei Badan. Okay? So from pot number 1, right, fell into a second mixture. L'shnei rimonim achirim mi rimonei badan. They all look the same. Okay. So now you have in a second pot or basket, whatever. V'nafal min hashlosha rimon echad l'rimonim achirim. That's number 3. Yeah. Har'el elu ha'achirim mutarim. The third group is mutar. Sha'arimon shel ta'arovet harishona batel berov. There's only bitul berov in the ta'arovet shlishit. Ve'im nafal min ta'arovet harishona rimon la'elef. Now he's telling you explicitly what the Gemara doesn't say. Right? Im nafal min ta'arovet harishona rimon la'elef kulan asurim. The Rambam says beferish that the second tarovet is asur, not like Tosfot that the second tarovet is only asur bevat achat. The second tarovet is asur entirely. Lo ne'emar batel berov. Listen to this formulation. Ela lahatir sfekan. She'im yipol mina ta'arovet hashniya lemakom acher eino oser v'chein kol chayotze bazeh. So the halacha, when they said that certain things are not batel berov, they said, but they are batel al yidei sfeka, is that if you have something which itself is a sfeka, it will be batel berov if it falls into a rov. So it's a sfeka in the second tarovet, but it's still not batel berov. It's only batel berov when this thing which is a sfeka falls into a third tarovet, then bittul will occur. Right? Broadly speaking, what that means is that for some reason, right, Chachamim gave special status. I mean, very careful the way I'm formulating this. I'm not even calling it chashivut. Right? They gave special status to certain objects, saying that they themselves are not batel berov, but they are batel berov al yidei sfeka. And that means that only once you have something which in and of itself is a sfeka, that it can be batel berov. That means that there's a mixture here between the objective and the subjective status. The fact that something is a sfek does not take away from its physical properties of being a rimon bedan. It's not a sfek rimon bedan. It's a rimon bedan. Right? But it's a sfek whether it's orlo or not. Or it's a sfek whether it's kilayim or not. but it's still a davar chashuv. But the fact that it's a sfek takes away, so to speak, I'm speaking very amorphous terms, takes away its chashivut so that it can be batel. But only if it's a sfeka already, then we say the rimon badan can be batel. But it has to be a sfeka already. If it's just a safek, in the first tarovet, it's just a safek. So it will not be batel in the second tarovet, because the safek is not batel of a rimon badan is not batel. It's only a sfeka which will be batel. So in the second tarovet, each unit is a sfeka, and therefore it can be batel in the third tarovet. Okay? So the Rambam requires 3 tarovot. Okay? Now, that's in Hilchot Ma'achalot Asurot Perek Tetzayin Halacha Yud. Okay? Now, the Rambam in Hilchot Avodah Zarah. Okay, Safek Avodat Kochavim Asur, sfeka mutar. Okay, second line of the Rambam. Ketzad kos shel avodat kochavim shenafal ba'otzar malei kosot kulan asurim. Okay, it's one. Mamish the case of the Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail, right? The Holy Grail was one of them. You don't remember this? Right? It was a long time ago. The Holy Grail was one of them, right? And he had to choose which one it was, right? So it's a tarovet of kosot. Okay, that doesn't mean I think Christianity is avodah zarah, right? But there was one kos among the kosot, right? It was one tarovet, kulam asurim, right? Mipnei she'avodat kochavim b'chol meshamsheh asurim b'chol shehen. It's not batel. Okay. Pireish kos echad min ha'ta'arovet v'nafal kosot shniyim to a second group. This is ta'arovet shniya sachakol. Har'el elu mutarim. Okay. Now tabat shel avodat kochavim, same thing. Shnidarav bekama tabaot v'naflu. No, it's a different issue here. Okay. So the Rambam in Hilchot Avodat Kochavim is matir the second ta'arovet. Whereas in Hilchot Machalot Asurot, he's only matir the third tarovet. Okay? The Mechaber was only matir the third tarovet. Remember? That's what we said. Okay? Let's try to understand the Rambam. Okay? There are, even though the cases are analogous, but there are 2 different reasons here why the particular Isser is not Batel. Okay? In the case of the Rimoni Badan, the reason the Isser isn't Batel is because of the physical chashivut of the chayfetz. Right? Rimon Badan is a type of fruit which is chashuv. Okay? Not because of the Isser. Right, but because of the physical nature of the kli, of the object. In Hilchot Avodah Zarah, why isn't the kos batel? Not because a kos is a davar chashuv. That's not the issue. The reason it's not batel is because it's Avodah Zarah. Okay? Because the Isser is severe. So it's not the same thing. That's why I was very careful when I said, Chachamim said for a number of reasons, something is not batel, they're not the same reason. They attributed, what I said before, special status. But what the nature of that special status is has to be fleshed out. And in the case of Rimonei Badan, the special status is derived from the physical characteristics. And in the case of Avodah Zarah, the special status is derived from the halachic severity, and not from the physical characteristics. Okay? Okay, so that's the case. Why should it be that in the case of Rimonei Badan we need 3 ta'arovot, but in the case of Avodah Zarah it's sufficient to have 2 ta'arovot? Okay? So let's think about this for a minute. Because when something is not batel, there are really two ways I can describe that reality, that the Isser is not batel. Okay? One way of saying it is, do you remember we had this when we talked about, in Lach, we talked about the chelev, which is nimoach in the rotev, and if you can add cold water and it coagulates, whether you have to do that or not, remember? So there we said that something that can be separated, in a sense, is not part of the tarovet. The only thing we're matir is when there's tarovet. Then you have a tarovet, you can be matir ayidei bittul. If you b'chalal don't have a tarovet, so there's no bittul barov to bring to bear on the situation. It has to be defined as a mixture. Okay? Now, I could say, when Chachamim say something X is not batel, what are they saying? They could be saying that this situation, even though maybe you don't know which is which, but we say this is not defined as a mixture. Okay? The element is, in a mixture, elements lose their identity. But if you have an element which has chashivut, for example, we say that it doesn't lose its identity, even in a mixture. So because it's not really defined as a mixture. Okay? That's one way to say it. Okay? Another way to say it is, no. There's a mixture here, and it really should be batel. But we say, for whatever reason, there's no bittul here. I'm not saying there's no mixture. I'm saying there may be a mixture. But despite the fact that you have a mixture, Chachamim came along and said, no, but there's no bittul. Okay? Do you see now, this might seem like hair splitting, but it may come down, these two ways of looking at it may help us explain the Rambam. If I have something which is not batel because of its physical characteristics, I'm basically saying that this object is never in a mixture. Rimonei b'dan, because the davar chashuv, are never defined as part of a tarovet. You can't have a mixture of rimonei b'dan. Just like you can't have a mixture of people. Right? Every person is a different person. You can't just have a tarovet of people. Okay? You might have holchim achar rov, but you don't have bittul b'rov. Right? So, but you don't have bittul with something which is chashuv. So when the Rambam is saying that if the reason that you don't have bittul is that you don't have something in a tarovet, okay? Now we'll have to flesh this out. Then you need 3 tarovot. Hold on. But in the case of avodah zarah, why is the avodah zarah not batel? Not because of its physical characteristics. So physically, a kos of avodah zarah or a tabat of avodah zarah can be in a tarovet of other kosot or other tabaot. It isn't. You can't say it's not a tarovet. It is a tarovet. But because the isser is so severe, so I say it's not batel. Okay?
So, kosot is something it's. I like the way you're going, but I'm having trouble with kosot. We sell the minyan. They're always sold.
All right, but we're not talking about it that way. This is true in all avodah zarah. It's not because it's I don't know, you buy kosot, I buy kosot in the supermarket, they come in packages of 6.
Exactly, you know exactly.
So it's not a davar sheb'minyan. You buy a package, you don't buy them one by one.
You don't buy
I don't want to argue about this davar sheb'minyan, because the way he's relating to it is in Hilchot avodah zarah and not in machalot asurot. And it's avodah zarah is not batel because it's avodah zarah. That's the way the Gemara talks about it. Not because of a davar sheb'minyan or anything else. Okay? So maybe the kosot, that there's such kosot which are not a davar sheb'minyan. Or maybe davar sheb'minyan is only in things which are food, and that's the way it was formulated, and in other things it wasn't. I don't know. But he's not talking about it that way, right? So the distinction would be as follows. If something is not in a tarovet, so in the first, quote-unquote, it's not even a tarovet, when the brimon badan falls into the first tarovet, it's not really in a tarovet. Right? So the rimon badan is be'en. It's there. And that means that everything in that pot, I'm not even talking about in that group, right? But not that mixture, everything in that group is asur b'torat vadai. There's no tarovet here. And the only time, and here there's a very interesting thing that happens, where I mix between the status of what, you could talk about, I'm going to use a fancy word, the epistemological status. In other words, what I know about this piece, or what I don't know about it, mixes together with the fact that it's in a mixture, and now it can become part of a tarovet. It's the rimon bedan when it's vadai and it falls into a group does not become part of a tarovet. But when something comes out of that group and now it's a sfek, even though it's a rimon bedan, but it's a sfek iser rimon bedan, when it falls into the second group, it is part of the tarovet. Are you with me? Notice there is a mixture that occurs between the halachic status and the physical status. I'll give you an example of this from the Mishnah in case you're not convinced. There's an opinion in the Mishnah. It's, I think, one of the last Mishnayot, Masechet Avodah Zarah, which we don't paskin like, which is maybe if you didn't learn the Mishnah, you don't know this, but we don't paskin like this, that the halacha of chaticha ruyalit kabed is only in things which are asur b'hana. If something is not asur b'hana, there's no din of chaticha ruyalit kabed. We don't pass in that way. We hold that chaticha ruyalit kabed is even in things which are not asur b'hana. Even in nevel and treifa, there's a din of chaticha ruyalit kabed. But the Mishnah the Mishnah in the end of Avodah Zarah holds that if it's asur b'hana, you have the din of chaticha ruyalit kabed. If it's not asur b'hana, then you don't have the din of chaticha ruyalit kabed. So what is chaticha ruyalit kabed? It has to do with the nature of the piece. You have a piece of steak, which is a mechubad serving. So it has to do with the chashivut of the piece. What do I care about whether it's asur b'hana or not? Whereas the halachic status also plays a role in determining the chashivut of the physical chashivut of the object. Okay? So that's what I'm claiming in terms of the Rambam. That, not in terms of asur b'hana or not asur b'hana, but in terms of whether something is a sfek or not. When it's a vadai iser, the rimon v'dan is not part of the tarovet. And therefore the first group is asur b'torat vadai, because there's no tarovet of iser and heter here. There's iser be'en here, which makes the group asur b'torat vadai. Now, when something comes out of that group, that is a sfek, and it becomes part of the mixture in the second group, which is the first tarovet. In a sense, the Rambam requires 3 tarovot because the first tarovet doesn't count because it's not a mixture. Right? In both cases, you need 2 mixtures in order to get to a sfeka. When it's because the object is chashuv, the first mixture is not really a mixture. Okay? Whereas in the case of Avodah Zarah, the kos or the tabat of Avodah Zarah can become part of the mixture, and therefore the first mixture is already a safek. Okay? They're all asur, but they're asur b'torat safek. This goes back to the original thing that we talked about. If you say sfeka l'chumra, just like when you talk about sfeka l'kula, is it mutter b'torat safek? Is it still a safek, or is it mutter b'torat vadai? When you talk about sfeka l'chumra, you have the same question. It's a safek, but we have to go l'chumra, so it's definitely asur. So it's asur b'torat vadai. And the fact that it's a safek is just history, but not halachic status. Halachic status is vadai asur. Or no, it's still asur b'torat safek. Okay? So the difference is in between the cases of whether you talk about rimon bedan or you're talking about avodah zarah. In the case of rimon bedan, the first ta'arovet is asur b'torat vadai. So you don't get to a sfek until the third ta'arovet. In the case of avodah zarah, the first ta'arovet is already asur, but it's asur b'torat safek, and therefore you have a sfek already in the second ta'arovet. Okay, that's what I think according to the Rambam.
Even though he uses the word ta'arovet throughout.
Nafal echad min ta'arovet hazot. Yeah, fine, that doesn't bother me because he's using the word ta'arovet in a different way than I'm using. I'm talking about it the way Reb Chaim would say chaloshem ta'arovet. The Rambam is just about a mitzias of a ta'arovet. I'm talking about a status of a ta'arovet. Okay.
And even though Avodah Zarah is more severe.
Avodah Zarah is more severe, but the lack of bittul doesn't come from its physical characteristics. So it does not affect the fact. In other words, whether something is part of a ta'arovet or not, should depend more on its physical characteristics than its halachic status. Whether it's mutter or aser could depend on its halachic status, the severity of the isser. Right? But whether it's in a mixture or not, so you just got to look at it. Is this something that mixes? That's a physical question. Right? So if I'm talking about Rimon Bedan, I'm saying this doesn't mix because it's so important. It's so big. It costs so much money. Right? Okay? Or for whatever reason, it has chashivut. Okay? So it doesn't mix. It's never considered part of a mixture. Okay? You always look at them as one by one.
But this coast is like any other coast, except that it was
Avodah Zarah, right?
For Avodah Zarah.
Right. So that, right, it's like any other coast. It doesn't have, it's chashuv not because of its physical characteristics, but because of its halachic severity. So that can be part of the mixture. The fact that Avodah Zarah doesn't mean it doesn't mix. The fact that it's Avodah Zarah means it won't be butter, but it does mix. Okay? Okay. The reason this is important is that it brings to the fore the question we talked about last time in the nature of the sfek. Right? Sometimes the sfek is aser Torah vadai, and sometimes the sfek is aser, but it's still a sfek. Right? So one ramification that we had was what we talked about last time. Is there a way to be mechalek between different severity of isurim, if it's chiyav kares or not chiyav kares? So you're taking a chance, you're not taking a chance. That sort of issue. And here you see there's a ramification in terms of how many ta'arovot do you require. All right? Now, let's take a look here.
When he says v'chen kol kiyaseh bazeh, is other cases of dvarim shein chashuvim.
Yeah. Right, because he doesn't mean Avodah Zarah, because that he tells you Nechus Avodah Zarah. Okay. This Shita Mekubetzet, there are a number of interesting points, but I want to concentrate on one of them here. He says as follows. Okay. Omnam.
Where are you?
Okay. 4 lines from the bottom. Perush Ri. Yeah?
Yes.
She'ein lahatir mitam sfeka ela heicha shasfekot shavot betrei bitulim. Kigon nitarvu acherot ba'acherot v'acherot ba'acherot. Okay, I'm not concerned with how many achirot now. He's not getting into that, right? But the type of sfeka that we have in the Gemara here that we've been talking about, okay? The chol sfekot al yidei eruv. All the sfekot are a consequence of ta'arovet. Aval hanach sfekot d'ze'ev, right? The case was, right, you had a sheep which was nidras al yidei ze'ev. So they had some sort of sfeka.
You don't know what sheep it is.
You know what sheep it is, and you don't know if the Ze'ev did it in a way that makes it a treifa. Okay? So he says, that's not a good sfek. Okay? Aval hanach sfekot de Ze'ev, sfekan einan shavot. The safek rishon, im zo behema shenatal ha-Ze'ev. It's a question of identity. The safek sheni, im hu drusat shein im lav. Okay? Was it clawed or was it bitten? Right? So if it was drusat shein, so it's a treifa, and if it's not drusat shein, it's not a treifa. So you don't know if this is the sheep, and you don't know, even if it is the sheep, you don't know whether it was nidras in a way that made it a treifa. Okay? So you have one question of identity and a question of what happened. Okay? So he says that you don't make. That's not a good sfek. Okay? The Rashba quotes this. Okay, let's see. This is the Tarta Bait. Miu amru mishmoshe Rabbeinu Yitzchak HaZakein hayadua bala tosafot zal. Okay? Shelo amru sfeka lahakel ela b'shtei sfekot habaot mikoach shtei ta'arovot. Okay? Kigon zo she'amarnu shenafla tabat shel avodat elilim l'ribo mirol l'ribo, right? The chol chad v'chadish b'tarovet shniya Ika trei sfeke. The b'chol chad v'chad ika l'meimer lo zohi shenafla kan. Im timtza lomar zohi shenafla kan, shema lo zohi shenafla l'ribo rishon. Aval ba'alma, in general, shena ba mikoach shnei tarovot, lo. Okay?
So he's
just quoting the Re, which I just read to you from the source. Okay? Now, what doesn't work? What doesn't work is a case in Gemara and Beitza. It depends how you have to explain the case of Gemara and Beitza a certain way. Okay? The case of Gemara and Beitza is Beitza shenolda b'yom tov fell into a ta'arovet. Okay? It also happens to be a davar sheish lo matirim, right? And then the Gemara says that the sfeka is. I think Gemara says sfeka is mutter. I'm sorry, I don't have the Gemara here. So let's see what he does with that. Hold on. So al keinu mefarish b'reish perak kama debates. Kimash amru sham nitarva be'elef. The beitza nitarva be'elef. Kulan asurot. Asfeka isurakai. We're talking about a case where the beitza was safek nolda b'yom tov. Okay, so it's a safek beitza shenolda b'yom tov. Maybe it was nolda before Yom Tov, or it was nolda on Yom Tov. So it's a safek whether it's nolad, and it fell into a ta'arovet. Okay, and that's the acherot. Okay, so about a safek shenitarev ba'acherot. And that case is still usher, and we don't say it's a sfeka. In other words, if I take one out of those achirot, out of the tarovet, and I say maybe this is the beitza that was problematic, maybe it's not. And even if this is the beitza which is problematic, right, it was sachakol, safek nolda b'yom tov, safek lo nolda b'yom tov. So why don't I have a sfeka? So the reason is because it's safek echad b'guf, the safek echad b'tarovet. And according to the Re, I don't say such a sfeka. I didn't explain why yet. Okay, but that is not a good sfeka. Namely, I have a suffix with regard to the identity of this beitza. That's a suffix echad beguf. I'm holding the beitza in my hand, so there's no suffix in ta'arovet. I know the beitza that I'm worried about. Okay, so it's not a ta'arovet, it's a suffix. It fell into a ta'arovet, right? So that ta'arovet is usher. And even though it's talking about a case of a safek beitza shenolda b'yom tov, that is how the Re explains the case. It says nafal ba'achirot. Okay, so what nafal ba'achirot? So he says a safek nafal ba'achirot, and it's not batel because you don't say sfeka in a safek echad b'guf or safek echad b'tarovet. Okay, klomar afilu safek nolda b'yom tov, safek lo nolda b'yom tov, im netava ba'achirot kulan asurot. Okay? So that's the sheet of the Re. Rabbeinu Tam disagrees with this. And Rabbeinu Tam says that the only reason that this tarovet is asura is because it's a vadai beitza, shenolda b'yom tov. Okay? If, Rabbeinu Tam says, if it was a safek beitza shenolda b'yom tov, then it would be mutter, mitam sfeka. Okay? That's, let's take a look back to Shulchan Aruch for a second. So Shulchan Aruch says, Yesh Omrim, hold on, Safek Trifa. Yeah, Seif Tet. Safek Treifa Shenitarev Ba'acherot. Right, Kuf Yud Seif Tet. Safek Treifa Shenitarev Ba'acherot. Kulan Asurot. Ad Sheyehei Beheter Kedei Levatel HaIsur. Imu midvarim hamitbatlim, shekevan shesafek harishon haya begufo, ein lahatiro misfek sfek. Okay, so you have a safek trefa, that's like the safek beitza shenolda b'yom tov. safek trefa, shinit arva. So you need bittul, and it has to be something which is mitbatel. If it's not something which is mitbatel, you don't say it's mutar mitzat sfeka. Okay? Right, so how do we understand this halacha? Okay? So here we have to go back to the Rashba and read them carefully. So here.
This is the re.
Yes, this is the re, but what the rationale for it is. Okay? Okay. Go to the, I don't know how it came out when you printed. I'm continuing the Rashba. It says, Ulididi kashali. Anybody have that?
That wonderful case.
What?
That wonderful
case. We're not talking about that. Not talking about the wonderful aspect of the case. Ulididi.
But we do have to acknowledge.
Yes, yeah, right. Ulididi. Okay, Ulididi. I understand. Ulididi kashali mida'amrina beperakama diktubot ha'omer petach patuach matzati ne'eman la'osra alav. Okay, a husband claims that his wife was not a virgin at the time that they were married, and in those days the reason there's a problem is that there was erusin a year before nisuin, so she has a status of an eshet ish prior to the wedding night. Okay? So if she was an eshet ish shezinta, she's asura l'ba'ala. So his claim is that she's asura alav. Okay? And we're only relating to this case in terms of the sfek. You don't want to understand the sfek. Okay? Okay? So my tama. So why is that? So shabi anafshi chaticha d'isur. Right? From his the way he relates to it, he relates to her as someone who's asura alav. That creates an isser. And the Gemara says, "Vakshinan." Gemara asks, "Amai sfek svekahu?" Why should it be asur? It's a case of a sfek sveka, because he doesn't know what happened. He can only say, "Let's assume that his reporting of the situation is accurate, that she wasn't the betulas." That's not a safek. Okay, the Gemara talks about other cases also, but in this case, we say that we are assuming that she wasn't the betulah, but we still have a sfek sveka. Safek tachtav zinta, safek ain't tachtav zinta. So we don't know when it happened. Right? That's something he can't tell us. Okay? So if it was tachtav, she's asura. But if it was ain't a tachtav, she's muteret. Okay? V'im timtzalom are tachtav zinta, safek ba'ones, safek b'ratzon. Okay? If it's ba'ones, she's not asura. Only b'ratzon, she's asura. Okay? So the Gemara answers. So the Gemara has to neutralize the sfek, and the Gemara neutralizes the sfek. V'okimna be'eshet kohen. So eshet kohen. So the isur would be an isur zona, not an isur eshet isha zinta. So the
You don't have the second stuff.
the ratzon, the ones ratzon is irrelevant. Okay. But be'eshet Yisrael lo. In the case of be'eshet Yisrael, we say enechinami. That's a good sfek. Okay? That means safek tachta, safek enech tachta, safek ba'onis, safek b'ratzon is a fine sfek. Okay? And so why is this is a question on the re, right? V'hatam ein hasafek or sfekot ba'ot mikoach ha'ta'arovot. There's no mixture. Right? There's no women mixed up with other women, right? It's not the case. It's all the guf. V'afilu hachi atadanotan b'sfek lahakeh. So you have a sfeka, which is not b'ta'arovot, for which you derive a kula. Okay, the yesh lomar is very important. The hatam shani. Okay, that case is different. Remember, I said there are two different types of sfekas, right? There's one type which is ta'arovot, but there's another type which is gufim. And that's what he's saying here. It's a different type of sfeka. But why is it a different type of sfeka? Yesh li lomar. The hatam, in that case, of ktubot, shani, she'i efshar lezo lavo lefanecha ela b'shtei sfekot. You're standing in the present. Okay? This, with regarding to this woman, you always have the two sfekot. Right? The question, she's a bu'ula. But is it tachtav? Ain't a tachtav. And even if you're going to say tachtav, safek ba'onis, safek b'ratzon, you can't avoid the fact that that you need basically the confluence of two events, one out of four possibilities, in order to say that she's asura, right? In other words, in order for her to be asura, it has to be tachtav b'ratzon, right? If it's tachtav b'ones, ain't it tachtav, bein b'ones, bein b'ratzon, she's muteret. So think of a mate, of a grid, right? So it's only one out of four that creates a problem, and she always comes before us with these four possibilities, right? You just have to ask, tachtav, ain't it tachtav, ones, or ratzon. So that is a sfek, that's a fine sfeka. The ata yachol lachmir aleha v'lomar hech natiru kvar asarta. This is important. Ukvar asarta. What does ukvar indicate? One word. Kvar. What does kvar indicate? Time. Right? Okay. So what he's saying is that what he's alluding to is why, what's the svara for the Riazaken? Why can't you say safek echad b'gufa, safek echad b'tarovet? Because if you have a safek by itself, you have to answer it. Because sfeka is l'chumra. If you have a safek by itself, kvar asarta. You can't be matir what you answered already. Because in order to have a sfeka, what you have to avoid like the plague is being alone with one of those sfekot. Okay? So if the two sfekot can only exist together, and that's the case of Masechet Ketubot, where you never have an isolated safek. The woman is here, and I always have to ask, ones ratzon tachtav eno tachtav. Those are the elements that I have to manipulate to say that she's asura. But I never get to ask the question, one question at a time. Because if I say safek ones, safek ratzon, even if it's ratzon, maybe it's eno tachtav. And if I say safek tachtav, safek eno tachtav, even if it's tachtav, maybe it was ba'ones. So I never have one question. I'm always dealing with two questions. Okay? So I have it, that's a sfeka. But if I say, safek echad b'gufa, safek echad b'tarovet. Okay? So I want to know, is this safek, this piece of meat, safek nevela, safek kshera, that fell into a tarovet. But one second, before, I'm using before very carefully here. Okay? Before could mean one of two things. Okay? Before could mean simply time, and that's ukvar asarta. Means if I know, okay, I have this piece of meat. Think of the case of the beitzah. I have the beitzah, and it's a safek noda b'yom tov. So what do I have to say if nola is an issa doraisa? That's how the Gemara is going over there. So if nola is issa doraisa, I have a sfeka doraisa l'chumra. So I said it's asur. Now this sfeka doraisa l'chumra then falls into a tarovet. So I can't use a sfeka there. Why? And this is very important. It still goes back to the original question of the nature of safek l'chumra. Why can't I say that? Because I already decided that question, right? How many times do you have to say, this comes up all the time, right? I decided this already. I don't want to revisit this, right? But no, we decided. You know, at some point you have to say, you can't live like an obsessive, compulsive neurotic, right? You can't keep opening the book again on what you decided, right? I decided this is good enough. I'm not looking at this again, right? So basically what he's saying is, after you have, on this safek nevela, right, you decided that it's asur. Okay? Now it fell into a tarovet. You want to open the book on the nevela, because you want to say, well, now what are you saying? Okay, now I'm looking at this tarovet, and I take one piece of meat out of this tarovet. I say, safek if this was the problem or not. And even if this is what fell in, it's safek nevela. You can't do that. You already decided that it's vaday asur. You can't reopen the book just because it fell into a tarovet.
Why can't you say the same thing with shtei taravot?
Yeah.
That is a good question. Why can't you say the same thing with shtei tarovot?
Meaning the first time it falls in, it's asur, so who cares that it fell again?
Okay, so then what is, now answer, good. It's a good question. Now you answer.
The answer is it's a tarovet. When it's now asur, but in the Torah tarovet, it's not asur in the Torah of nevela. But we could have said.
No, say it, but no, you don't have to introduce, you just introduce new terminology. I think you know what you're talking about, right? But use the old terminology. Say, you don't have to introduce this new terminology you just introduced. Say it much simpler. In a ta'arovet, the suffix in a ta'arovet is what?
Still a suffix.
It's still a suffix. The suffix of the identity of this suffix nevela, when I say it's the chumrah, is no longer a suffix.
Depending on how whether you say it's.
Right. So I'm only saying what I need to say to understand this. Right. I'm using Occam's razor. I'm only saying what I need to say. Right. I'm not doing anything. I'm not taking any luxuries here about saying things stam. Right. I'm only saying what I need to say. What I need to say in order to explain this, and then I can flesh it out and see if it makes sense. But what I need to say in order to explain this is that what he's saying, kvar asarta. That if I decide one of those sfekot, I'm finished. And the fact that it falls into a ta'arovet doesn't reopen the book on what I decided already.
That's my question. With the egg, why can't we, when we decided that, why don't we still say it? I mean, that's a case of suffix. Where did it?
So as I said, if I went l'chumra, so on that egg I said sfek l'chumra. So that's it. Sfek l'chumra is vaday aser.
Or it's still a suffix.
No. So this is now. It's not chiseled in stone. We're talking about. Stop. Because I'm trying to understand the re. It's the re azakin I'm trying to understand. The Rambam can disagree. Rabbeinu Tam can disagree. We can have a whole bunch of Rishonim that disagree explicitly, implicitly, that didn't like it. That's fine. I just have to understand right now the re azakin.
Okay. So
What the re azakin holds is that when you say sfeka l'chumra, it's b'torat vadai. And therefore, I have to avoid, like the plague, being alone with one suffix. If I have one suffix and I say suffix l'chumra, it's l'chumra b'torat vadai, and it will not become mutter in a tarovet. Because it's a vadayissa that fell into one tarovet. It's not a sfek anymore.
They happen sort of simultaneously and you never...
Hold on. Stop. Simultaneously is time. Hold on.
You know what I'm saying? So the cup, the avodah zarah cup falls into these other cups. Now I have a suffix. Can I use these cups? What's the answer?
The avodah zarah cup into... Oh, so what do you have to say? That in that first tarovet, there it's still a suffix. There it's not b'torat vadai.
I know, but why? That's what
Why?
I'm
Okay. Why is not b'torat vadai? So the simple... I can take the really easy way out. Because it's only asur midrabbanan.
Okay.
Okay? That is, if you look in the Ramah, Yesh Omrim, Hatam da Asur, Oiv HaSafek Hu Isur D'Oraita. Safek Treifa, Safek Beit Shenol B'Yom Tov if Nolad is Midoraita, is a Sfek D'Oraita. V'lo Nuchal Lomar Od Safek She'ein Kan Isur Rak Shinit Arei B'Acherim. Can't say that because it's a Sfek D'Oraita L'Chumra, and we saw explicitly the Rashba said. You remember that? Rashba said that Sfek D'Oraita L'Chumra is B'Torat Vadai. He says it's Vadai Aser. That fits here, right? Can't say it's a suffix shnit arev. Lo mikri sveka v'aser. Aval im hayu beit svekot im hayakan iser klal. That would be the case of ones ratzon taktav eno taktav. Vinod u beit svekot biyachad. Now he's introducing the time element, and this is important. Matirin sveka b'chol makom. Vafilu be'isur d'oraita, v'gufo shel isur. Okay, and then it's afilu b'cheskas isur. Okay, now the case of the ta'arovot, cases of ta'arovot will always be d'Rabbanan, because midoraisa everything is bata, right? So that's one way of explaining it. Is that in ta'arovot, since you told me it's d'Rabbanan that it's not batel, we still say it's a suffix. If we're talking about an Isadoraita, then we would say sfeka l'chumra b'torat vadai, and you already decided that question, and you can't be matir it by another ta'arovet.